Hi there, welcome back to the Developer's Guide to Windows 10, Build 10 240 edition. So we've now got a couple of sessions. Shen's going to lead on these one, talking about some of the enhancements we've got in XAML on Perf.
Yeah.
And also you're then going to follow on, well, we're going to let a little break.
And then we're going to some of the tools.
Looking at some of the great tooling we've got in Visual Studio.
So why don't we have a look at what's the agenda for the next 30 minutes?
Sure.
So I think we should start with the imperative question, what is performance? I think that'll be an interesting one. And then we'll talk about what we're trying to do to help make sure that your applications,
remain
at the best possible performance they can be. And then we'll talk about deferred loading. So
yeah, that's cool. I mean, because, and we're talking about, obviously, XAML is really, really powerful, but it's also, getting the best perf out of it is obviously, you always want to eke out these little things. You want to get things going as fast as possible.
Well, that's it, because, like, sometimes you'll just be happily, XAMLing and coding away, and then you won't realize, that your app is slowly but surely getting slower and slower and slower. And I want to actually show you some things that you can do to make sure that your app remains responsive, fast, and, you take some techniques away from this and then build them into your app.
Sure.
So let's start with a simple question. What is performance? Performance, it's such a diverse term when you think about it, because when someone says, I want my app to be, fantastic and it's got to have the greatest performance ever, it can mean a multitude of things. So for me, there are four main aspects that I think of when people say performance. There's startup performance. So in this case, in a XAML application, that's quite heavily related to things like the tree density and the complexity, how much depth you've got on your visual tree. The next one is in the rendering performance. So again, this is how much memory you may consume at the time of rendering all these UI elements on screen, and
sure.
that obviously has an effect on how people have to then wait for your application, and also the user perception.
Yeah.
Because the startup is a thing that people normally see first. It's like the shop front of your app. If that takes a long time, perceptions are already been formed at that point.
And there's things like, it's best to show something so that they see something and then fill it in afterwards, rather than wait until you've got everything just right and then show it. And
exactly.
So giving people a perception of good performance is kind of the art.
We're going to show you some of the, like tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
And then there's interactive performance. So we've all been there. Like if anyone's done like line of business apps, I'm sure you've got to the point where you've had, like a list and it's just got so much data, and then you start scrolling and realizing you're getting virtualization issues maybe, or things just aren't scrolling how you'd expect, and it just starts slowing down. So we'll probably think about how we're helping you with that too. And the final one is sort of workflow performance. So this is as you're like navigating through your app and going through, and you're seeing different things like animations being kicked off to get the user from one page to another. You might find that slow because you've just got so much happening between the two pages.
And it's probably worth mentioning, isn't it? I mean, these performance problems can hit anything, but we're not talking about a little hello world kind of here.
No.
Most moderate complexity apps are obviously are going to benefit from having a good focus on these kind of things.
I think performance is one of those things where it creeps up on you, because when you start off an app, it always starts simple, and you never notice it, and then all of a sudden you get to the point of realization when you think, this is actually slowed down quite a bit, but it's trying to work out what it is that then cause that. So this is one that you should always take into consideration at the start of your app building, just so you don't get it sort of creep up on you at the last minute, and then you'll be like, just sitting there like crying and trying to work out what's going on.
Right.
Happened to me too many times, I think.
Yeah.
So we at Microsoft have also tried to make sure that we've done the best thing possible to make sure that your apps remain fast and responsive. So I've just got a couple of graphs here. You can see we've got the memory in the startup. And you can see that even when we talk about, we said Hello World isn't impacted, but actually you can see that even on the Hello World was impacted. So on the mobile, you can see here that actually previously on 8.1, the memory usage was 7.5 megs. Hello World now is 4.2.
That's pretty impressive.
So even Hello World will be faster than ever before.
And this is just, you get this for free just by simply moving from an 8.1 app and building it under 10.
Correct.
You get all the benefits that we've built into the XAML framework, the XAML runtime. You get all this perf and the...
and I think a lot of it's also to do with the fact that we're now making sure that all our first-party apps are also using our control. So obviously we feel the pinch sometimes, so we're like, we're realizing there's where the issues were before and trying to fix those as well. And if we have a look, even the dialer on the phone has obviously got faster.
Yeah.
And your favorite application, the calculator?
love it.
So you can see why the calculator's also been great in your demos. It's obviously got a lower memory footprint.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah,
if we look at the startup there, you know, like we're talking milliseconds for what I would say
so
are
of course, Hello World doesn't have a lot to do, so you don't see so much
No.
benefit there. But yeah, getting a bit more complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see even for the simpler apps, we've managed to you know, shave off a lot of time. So if you then sort of take your, you know, your more complex apps and then you exponentially increase it, you can see that actually there'll be a bigger and bigger gap as you move to Windows 10 development.
Yeah.
And there are small tweaks we've done as well in Windows 10, just simple things like rendering the text, you know, like 50% faster. And you'd think, okay, you know, that doesn't make a big difference, but then when you look
think
at
how much text.
yeah, that's the thing, because you know, you have like text box and text boxes and everything everywhere. It's, you know, it's pretty much difficult to find an app that doesn't use text.
If you think about a bit of text, you know, it's quite complex, isn't it, to put that up on the screen at the right size and, you know, and the right scale.
And we're using effective pixels, so you've got the scaling algorithm and all that. So you can see it's made a big difference.
Yeah.
So the thing is, obviously, we've done a lot to make sure that your applications remain fast. But we also want to make sure that you have the opportunity as well to help, you know, the actual platform make a decision on what to do. So we're introducing something called phase rendering. So as you know, when you load your favorite app, it just loads up everything at one go. All your UI elements have the same priority in loading. So generally, without phase loading, everything's just almost like a big bang, like I'm ready, and it renders everything. So what we're now doing, though, is we're introducing X-phase.
All right. Okay.
So X-phase is pretty cool. You can see it here. So you can see I've got a data template using the Xbind stuff. You can see I've got a model monster, and I have a name and the star sign of the monster. You can see here that I've actually added X-phase, because actually what's happening here is by default, everything has a phase of 0, which is a higher priority. So what I'm saying here is, actually, when I see a monster, I care more about its name, so I can say to everyone, hey, look, there's monster Larry or whatever, run. And I'm probably not so worried about Larry's star sign. So actually I say, you know what, if this renders a bit later, it's okay. And the idea is it does it sort of progressively. So
and I guess what we're talking about here is the classical case where you've got a long list and somebody's doing that, scrolling
nuts,
fast, and actually you get this kind of fade to grey problem, don't you, on the slow rendering systems, where the rendering system can't keep up with the speed of the list moving past.
That's correct.
So with this, it basically will always render the name, but if it hasn't got time to render the star sign before it slips off, it just won't do it. So you because it's blurring past the user anyway, they get the impression of it still looking great, but and then when it slows down, obviously the subsequent phases all fill in, won't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing about phases is, you know, like, they don't have to be sort of sequential, so you can have things like 1 and 3, and if you later on decide, actually, I need to add something into 2, that's okay as well. So it's got all that nice things around it.
And actually, it's typical, isn't it, about things like images. They're the classical ones to put on a high phase number, because rendering them is expensive, and you don't want to bother while you're in motion and scrolling through a big list.
But you should also be very careful as well, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have too many phases. If you find yourself managing 10 phases, you probably think something's going wrong there, because it means your UI is probably a bit too busy, and maybe you need to revisit
what you're trying to show.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just one of the things that we're introducing as part of, you know, some of the performance tips in XAML. The other thing I want to talk to you about is deferred loading.
Okay.
So deferred loading is slightly different. So in essence, what this actually does is, unlike phase, which always loads everything just in a timely manner, what deferred actually does is it'll say, actually, I don't want you to load this just yet. Hold on, and I'll tell you when I'm ready. So essentially, your visual tree is a lot smaller. And in essence, you'll find that that also increases things like startup times. Now, the thing is, if it's not rendered in the visual tree, you need ways to go and activate it to sort of say, hey, you know what, this is now's a good time.
How does it know when to? If you're deferring it because it's not needed initially, how does it decide when's the right time?
So really, one way to do this is you can call the method find name, and then you just pass it the name of the UI element. This will then realize the UI element, and we'll show you a demo later on with that. You can do it for get child templated child, that will call it. And you've also got storyboard and visual state. So by default, they sort of, when you flip visual state, it'll automatically realize objects for you.
As soon as it needs to do something
Yeah.
with it. It will just
The
then
framework will
it-
just be like,
it'll
I
sort of
know you
work
want to
it out,
change
yeah.
states, so
Yeah.
I'll do something.
yeah,
But
yeah,
again, with other things like phase and defer, there is an implicit cost that comes with this, because although you're deferring the initial load time, eventually when you do load these things, you will have to make sure that you are being clever about your resources. So things like, for example, if you have any data binding or events, well, actually these don't get wired up or data bound, even if you're using some of the more compile time bindings like xbind. They won't happen until you've realized the UI element, because essentially it never existed in the first place, so there's nothing to bind to.
So could you do something like you load your page up, you've got a bunch of elements on there, grid or something that's deferred loading, and then at some point you could find name on it, but have it it's invisible. So it actually is in the tree now.
So what you're
and
saying
then it will
is,
get,
yeah, so
he's
you're
kind
saying
of
you set
loaded
it
in the
to
background.
collapsed as visibility,
Yeah.
but then you could do, absolutely, you could do, and then
then
when you're
then
ready,
you could have it ready, show it. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, there's
that's a
all
possibility.
kinds of tricks.
There is loads of tricks. I think it all depends on the resources and stuff. And like even when you're doing things like this, you may decide that actually I could use deferred loading and phase at the same time. So I could do a mixture of the two. So I could load up maybe an object, and in that object I've got phases within it, so it knows actually when it should phase in certain things.
Right.
So there are loads of like little tips and tricks you can do there.
Sure.
So let's have a look at a quick XDefer.
Right.
So you can see here it's a stack panel that I've got, and at the moment the visibility is collapsed. It shouldn't make a difference. And this is the real thing here. So you just want to be lazy, really. Lazy is the key to success with deferred loading.
Okay.
Actually, at the moment there is only lazy.
Is that the only kind of?
So I think there'll be more come down the line. But
not deferred load strategy laid back or
no.
Wake me up at 10. No, nothing like that.
That's probably next revision, I think.
Okay.
So in essence, we do this. So I want to actually show you a very quick demo of XDeferred.
Cool.
So bear with me. I'm going to do the shuffle. Here we go. And hopefully you can all see that. Fantastic. So let me show you this out first. Oh, do you recognize this logo?
No idea what that is. It's 4 squares, yeah.
4 squares.
Oh, yeah.
So what I'm going to do here is this is a very basic example of a very, very simple app. And you can see here it's just 4 borders with the colors.
Like I said, it's 4 squares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing too exciting. So I want to show you what people sometimes do, and I want to show you then what XDefer does, so you can see the difference. So something that's very common is people go, oh, you know what? I think I know the solution to this. I am basically going to collapse. So when I run this up again, and here you go. So you can see it's a blank screen.
Yeah.
So you think it hasn't rendered, but we'll go into more about this live visual tree, but for this demonstration purpose, I just want to show you what this does.
So this is cool. So you can see actually this is the XAML tree.
This is a XAML tree. This is actually what's been rendered by the XAML engine.
Okay.
You can see actually my borders are still all there. So actually, although you don't
visibility doesn't save you a lot.
It doesn't save you a lot.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Taking up space.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, that really isn't an option. So okay. So the other neat trick I've seen people do is this. So opacity 0. Let's just grab that.
Okay. Yeah. So therefore it's completely transparent.
Transparent. Let's see if this gives us something different. So here we go again. So the result looks right.
Same effect.
Yeah, the result looks right.
Yeah.
Let's just pop that open there. But you can see actually it's
there.
still there.
Yeah.
So although I'm not rendering it, or you can't see it being rendered, it's still in the tree.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's now do something different. Yep, we do this. So I'm going to take these out.
Okay.
Now one thing to note here is actually when you use things like XDefer, you have to name your UI element, because otherwise there's no way to find it. So otherwise you'll say, hey, don't render it now, but then you'll be like, oh, I've got no way to render it.
It'll be a lost orphan. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to say lazy, and actually I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and all these have already got X names on them, so
Yeah.
I've already named them all. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the easiest way to then see on the visual tree. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this. Okay, looking good.
Blank screen.
Blank screen. You never thought you'd see a demo where you actually wanted a blank screen. But you can see
Whoa.
actually it hasn't loaded. But how do I get my items back? Well,
Okay.
I'm going to show you one of the techniques.
Yeah.
So I've got a button here,
Yeah.
conveniently commented out for demo purposes.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add a click event handler.
Okay.
And I'm just going to go there. So in this click event handler, what I want to essentially do is I'm going to use the find name, because
Yep.
I think that's probably the most useful for me. I'm going to add red.
Weirdly, you know, if you used to look at the kind of designer-generated code and sort of early XAML, you'd see find names everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just not something a developer tends to use very
No,
much,
it's kind of, yeah,
the
it's true.
Plumbing code loves it. It's a way of finding stuff, and then
It works.
yeah.
So here we go. So we've got my button. So
Yeah.
now, let's do this. See if I can get a side by side. Don't you just love that?
Ah, that's awesome. Yes.
So you can see here, I don't have,
Apart from that,
Let's-
that's not so
let's-
awesome.
we'll talk about more of those in my next session. So you can see here that actually all it's showing is the button.
Yep.
Now if I hit load,
Yay. All
so
right.
you can see, so that is proof
Yeah.
that it's there.
Yes.
Now, one thing I just want to quickly go through is to show you what happens if I try to do this. Let's comment this out. I'm going to say this.red. Now notice that IntelliSense is picking this up. It's saying, yeah, fine, it's there,
I know
it's
about
okay.
this thing called red. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go and change the visibility on it. And I'm just going to say visible. So let's see what happens at this point. Cool. And you get an exception.
Null reference.
And you'll get
Yes.
that because actually it doesn't exist.
It's not been realised yet.
So the key
Yeah.
takeaway here is that always make sure that your elements have been, realized, because if you don't,
Yep.
you'll end up facing this.
Okay.
So that's a very quick sort of XDefer example. So let me try and go back to slides.
Great. That's cool. Good stuff. And this is obviously, for people who really want to eke out that last bit of
Yeah,
perf, but it's something that people need to think about right from the beginning of. It's like you say, once you're deep in developing an app and you get so far down the road, and bad performance problems can kind of creep up you. It needs to be part of your psyche. You're thinking about right from the beginning.
well that's the thing, because if you don't, then you'll probably find that it causes you a whole load of pain later on, because you'll be sitting there going, why is it throwing exceptions? And a lot of these will be runtime exceptions, not compile time.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
you won't really know what's
Yeah.
going on until it's
Yeah.
too late. So we've already said that visual states will realize deferred elements.
Yep.
But the other thing you've got to remember is actually, we've talked a lot about the XAML elements, or the UI, make sure we defer that rendering. But what about your data? Because we know people out there have essentially, tens and thousands of rows of data that they may want to display on their application. So we've talked about the visual virtualization a little bit. And that's what your controls inherently have. So this might be the virtualizing stack panel
Yep.
and things like that, maybe in your list view. But then we have data virtualization. So this is slightly different.
I once created a sample on a blog post with 1 billion lines of data in it.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
So there are two main ones. So there's the random access virtualization and there's incremental virtualization. So think of random access virtualization as I have in my data set, let's say 100,000 rows. In those 100,000 rows, let's say my UI can only display 100.
Yep.
So at this point, when I look at the user interface, it's going to have the scroll bar, which looks like, the thumbnail is going to be small because
Yes.
it's seeing like 100,000.
Yep.
But essentially, it's only ever pulled back the 100 or so that can be rendered. And maybe plus or minus some for buffer.
It gets back the visible items plus
Correct.
kind of a bit of a buffer each
A
way.
buffer, but not too much. If I then grab that thumbnail and then I drag it into the middle, at that point, essentially what random access virtualization is all about is it's going to say, oh, you've sort of gone to the middle and you're between this number, and then you go and do another server request or
Yeah.
request from your database or whatever data storage you have. That is one way, and that uses the IObserver vector, I think. The second way is incremental virtualization. This one people probably see more because it's more web-centric.
Right.
And if you think about this, this is where I know I've got 100,000 items that I can pull from my database, but I can only show 100. My scroll viewer, the thumbnail, looks pretty big because it can only scroll 100 items. When I get to the bottom, it then does another request, like a page. So it's like, hey, you know, Shen's hit the bottom. He's at number 100.
Yeah.
So you need to now request 101 to 200. And then it'll go into a separate request again, and it'll pull. And, you know, it's always that sort of spinning wheel you see on websites when they go and load more.
Yeah.
So those basically are the two data virtualization techniques you can use. And we have like an interface for I support incremental.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is a very quick walkthrough of just some of the things around XAML performance and what you can do to make sure your application's quick.
Right.
So we've had a quick review of what performance is.
Yep.
And the 4 types.
And the phase rendering, which really applies to data templates in lists. Really.
Correct, yeah.
Yep. And then obviously the XDefer,
XDefer.
lazy loading.
Correct, yeah, where we show the
nice
Microsoft
way of
logo.
only realizing elements when you actually need them. And that's a great one for in Visual States where you've got alternative layouts.
Yes.
And on a particular device, you know, maybe you've got 2 list views, and one is visible and one is not, depending on which device family you're on. If you use XDefer loading on that, well, obviously the one of them will never get realized, so you don't have that cost of it sitting there in the tree. So really easy performance gain that you got there.
Correct. Literally the time you lose out is once you've obviously loaded it, it's loaded. Like you can't really then go back and do an unload and say, hey, go back to lazy.
No, that's right. Yeah. So it depends on the trigger that's causing it to be realised, I guess, as to the real benefit, the permanent benefit you're going to get from that. Yeah. But that's we had a question this morning, didn't we, about somebody saying about completely changing a grid view in an adaptive UI sense, changing the layout from one to the other. So you could load it in one state, and the completely alternative version of the grid view with a different layout is X-deferred and is hidden. And then at some point the Visual State Manager might trip over and the other one will get realised.
Correct.
You can't then hide the first one, but at least you've had that performance.
No, exactly. You'd make a decision and say, well, actually, I think this is the one that's going to be shown the most.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that's the one that's rendered first.
Yeah.
And then if I know that this one's more an edge case, then if I need it, then I'll use the XDefer and load it in place.
That's right. And that's about startup performance, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And even some of the page performances as you're going from one page to another.
True enough.
So it's pretty much everywhere. But you know, I think the one that advice would give is don't go crazy using it everywhere, because there will eventually be an inherent cost when they do all load up.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it for this session. It was nice, short and sweet.
Nice, short and sweet. Yeah, a little bit nice performance tips. And I think the next session you showed us already a little introduction to some of the visual tooling in Visual Studio. And the next one is all about.
I thought I'd give you a little teaser.
All right.
But cool. All right. Thanks very much for watching.
So we'll take a 5 or 6 minute break.
5 or 6 minutes.
And then we'll be back on a half hour for Visual Studio tooling. Join us then.
Thank you.